Such a lovely story, this, isn't it? And it's kind of one of those stories that you think, is there anything else that can be said about this story? It's in the context, as you probably know, of the lost sheep and the lost coin, and then the lost son in that sense. And one of the commentaries that I read pointed out something I hadn't seen before, which was that when Jesus told the story in that order, the lost sheep was 1 in 100 and was so important that the shepherd went out to look for that lost sheep. And there was a celebration. The lost coin was one of 10, and yet was so important. And there was a celebration when it was found. And the son, an individual, so important. And again, there was a celebration. And you know the story, we've heard the story, he asked for his inheritance. And being the younger son, he wouldn't have had 50%, he'd have had a third because of the way that the inheritance laws in Israel were at the time. So the older son would have got double what the younger son would have got. So the older son would have got 2/3 and the younger son would have got 1/3. And it's not the done thing to go asking. I mean, we wouldn't even do it these days, really, would we? Wouldn't go asking for our inheritance before the person's died, because it's a bit like saying, I wish you were dead. I'd rather have the money, thanks. But anyway, he did it. And he went off to a far land, as it says. We don't know how far, but he went off to a foreign place and he squandered his money. And actually the word that is used for squandered is literally extravagantly wasted. He extravagantly wasted his money. If I was to say to you which one of the two sons is in this story is the prodigal son, you would tell me the younger one. Absolutely. Do you know what prodigal actually means? I didn't, actually. I thought I did. I thought I knew what prodigal meant. Any guesses what prodigal might mean? You can't answer. Looking for, yeah, I would have gone with those, yeah. Wayward. I would have gone with the one who came back. If you'd have asked me yesterday what prodigal meant, yesterday morning, I'd have said, well, the one who came back. That's what I thought prodigal meant. But actually, prodigal means to squander. So the prodigal son, being the younger son, is prodigal because he squandered all the money. He spent all he had until it was gone. And then, of course, he ended up in the pits, didn't he? The complete pits. Because he ended up in a situation of prolonged famine, which, to give him his due, he could not have predicted, perhaps. He was a son of a farmer, so he probably went looking for farm jobs, but because of the drought, the famine, there was none. And he ended up feeding the pigs. And for a good Jewish or a not so good Jewish boy, feeding the pigs is just about the bottom of the pile. Pigs, of course, being unclean. And he ends up thinking that the pigs, unclean as they are better off than he is. And so he reconsiders his position. And he does that thing that we so often do, don't we? That if we recognise we're in the wrong and we need to make amends in some way, we rehearse what we're going to say. Yeah? Have you ever done that? Rehearsed what you might say to somebody when you want to rebuild a bridge. And he puts together his little speech. And actually, he does pretty well. He gets it right because he prepares a full apology. He confesses his sin against God. He confesses his sin against his father. He renounces any claim to sonship. And he basically says, I'll be a servant. And the grace of this story is that his father meets him halfway. maybe even further than halfway. But as soon as the father saw the son, he was on his way. Lovely, wasn't it, to see the father galloping towards the son and hugging him so much that actually he took him off the ground. What a celebration. But when you think of the prodigal as being the one who squanders, is there another prodigal in this story? I think it's possible that the older son is also a prodigal son. So what sort of prodigal is he? He's not spending money, is he? He's working his socks off in the fields for his father. But he is squandering, because in a sense he's squandering his father's love, his father's grace, his father's presence. And all he can think about is what he's earned. He's earned his father's favour because he's worked so hard. And there's nothing about enjoyment of relationship, is there? There's nothing about intimacy. There's nothing about having lived and eaten well, lived well, yes, worked, but lived at his father's table for all those years. And he thought that because he'd stayed, he had rights, as if he could earn the rights of sonship. But in that sense, it can't be earned, it can only be gifted. And so in that sense, I suspect that we too are prodigals, because if we think about our own relationship with God, I suspect there are times in our lives when we squander the grace and the love and the forgiveness, the mercy that is available to us. Do I live grace to the full? No, I can't say that I do. Do I live in forgiveness to the full? No, I can't say that I do. Do I live in the freedoms that Jesus has brought all the time? I can't say that I do. I guess that makes me a prodigal then, in the same way that the younger son was a prodigal. It's just that I squander different things. But God is still the welcoming Father, still willing to come and welcome us as soon as he sees that we are on our way back to him. And when we do that, he's there quicker than the blink of an eye. Because we take it for granted, especially if we've been Christians for a long time. It's so easy to take the love of God for granted, isn't it? So easy to take the grace of God for granted. So easy to take his mercy and his forgiveness for granted that we don't live in the joy of it. Maybe you do. Maybe I'm doing you an injustice. Maybe you do. In the joy of it every day. I know I don't. It's a struggle. So I'm a prodigal too.